Hi everyone, welcome back to another video with me, The Lens That Listens. Today I want to be talking about portrait psychology, specifically about why some portraits feel forced or look forced and how I, as a photographer, avoid it. I've been thinking about it lately. Why do certain portraits look forced or feel forced, even if you can see that they've used the right settings, the exposure, the lighting, everything is good and looks professionally done. And this isn't criticism, this is definitely something I've done as a photographer and seen in my own work, that certain poses look forced. But the more I realise and the more I look into my work and have been doing photography, it's not actually about posing necessarily or the right pose, but it's actually about psychology. So when I say force, I mean something a little bit more subtle, and it's that feeling that you get when you look at a photo and we feel like, this person looks like they know they're being photographed. There's something missing in terms of the raw humanness about it. And forced portraits often look like someone is being managed or someone is strategically being posed in a way to look a certain way. You know, that can be shown in over-posing, over-directing, asking someone to give expressions, and how I like to say it's almost as if it's performance and not presence. And obviously I have definitely been a part of this process, and oftentimes when I've over-directed models, found that models tend to become less relaxed in their body. Over-direction can sometimes lead to that. And definitely the more I direct, I've definitely seen the person in the image slowly disappears. The humanness and the relaxedness of that person kind of just deteriorates, and you find what you're left with is a forced portrait that just looks like what someone's been told to do as opposed to what they're just easily flowed into. And I feel like this happens because when people feel like they're being observed or they're being watched, they become a bit more self-conscious and they become less relaxed because they feel like they have to put up a front or something. And it's a very, I feel like it's a very deep psychological process that happens to all humans on a very subconscious level. If certain things happen in the environment, like do this, do that, no, you need to do this, do that. As much as that can be helpful in some situations, it's almost not helpful in other situations, and it all depends on the person that you're shooting as well and how they respond to certain cues and certain directions. But as a whole, I definitely have found, like I said, the more I direct, the less of the person, the raw human person I see in front of the lens. As humans, when we feel like we're being watched, we tend to manage a lot more how we appear. So the camera creates that awareness. Awareness creates self-consciousness. And then self-consciousness can create that sense of performance. So some examples is like when silence becomes very apparent and silence is really thick in the environment. You know, we call it the awkward silence. When that happens, sometimes we feel like we need to fill it with conversation, we need to fill it with small talk, we need to fill it with something so we don't feel that awkwardness. Similarly, when subjects feel like they're being observed, they adjust themselves. And then from an example as a photographer, when we panic and are worried about what's going to happen, we tend to over-direct. Or in my case, I feel like when I have such a rigid vision for what I want, I tend to over-direct. Or when I'm nervous or when I want to make sure that that person feels that I'm doing the job that I need to be doing, can create something totally the opposite of my aim. Creating portraits that feel forced and not necessarily human. Performative, but not necessarily present. That stiffness that sometimes we see in a model after they feel self-conscious isn't necessarily resistance or I don't want to be taken a photo of, I don't want to It's more how we subconsciously self-protect, how we protect ourselves from a possible threat. Obviously, it's not that deep of a threat, but that's what happens in our brains subconsciously when we feel like we're being observed. When I used to face this problem and feeling like the model's not comfortable, I would usually think that my way to fix that problem would be try and find a solution within the sphere of photography as I knew it. Maybe I need to change this. Maybe they need to pose like this. Maybe they're not comfortable in the outfit. Maybe this. And these may possibly be elements that could potentially affect how at ease the model feels. But having learned more about working with people, I've actually come to realize that my job is not about fixing these things, but it's actually about creating an environment of safety. Sometimes it can be about the speed in which you're photographing. We tend to rush to get the perfect frame and we direct the model before they've even had a chance to be present and to feel grounded in the space and to feel safe in the space. So before that rushing happens, even before the tone has been set of safety and of calmness, the person never feels grounded, and so they're constantly in this space of like tension. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be shaking, they have to be like, it's on a very subconscious level, and that can show very much, especially in headshot photography, in the eyes, in the jaw, in just the softness of their face. So to share a little story, I was working with someone and they were obviously feeling a bit more stressed. They were feeling, I could just sense, again with body language, that they were just a bit more in their head. They weren't really relaxed on set. I just set my camera down and thought, right, let's just leave this for a moment. Let's not make it about this. Let's make it about connecting with the person in front of me. And we just sat there and we just spoke a little bit. And obviously, if it's someone that you're shooting for the very first time and you've only had maybe a one meeting or one phone call, you're not used to each other's energy. So having that talk and having that moment to just sit there and to connect with each other's energy, sometimes without us knowing, it's those moments of presence and not performance that can create the exact look and the exact outcome that you're wanting in your photos, which is that raw presence, humanness that you can see in the eyes, that you can just feel when you look at a photo. So that moment definitely changed the way I approach photography, the way I approach working with people, and the way I approach capturing people with my camera. And now what I do is, instead of fast paced, as much as you can, because I know there's time constraints within studios, but I try to be more conscious and more steady with the timings that I have with my models and with the people I'm working with. So I allow silence to sit. I allow silence to settle into the space between me and the model. It allows them to feel at ease and to not feel rushed. It's almost like that meditative grounding experience at the beginning to set the tone of that ease and not a rushed environment. Another thing is that I don't correct posture straight away. I let them get into it, because what I've found is a lot of the times the first few photos that I capture, depending if it's in a studio setting and they're sitting here and the camera's here, the lights are here, it's very intimidating. It's very like, I need to pose. So that they naturally, even without my input initially, they become very, again, self-conscious, like, oh, like this is all here now, like I need to like make sure like I'm like this. So I don't correct posture, or I don't tell them relax to begin with. I just let them relax, if that makes sense. I take some photos, I show them, I let them get used to the environment, let them get used to the camera, let them get used to the lightings, let them get used to my energy and my presence. I just let them ease themselves into the experience. And then I observe body language. So throughout that whole process, I observe, I watch their breathing, I watch their body, how their shoulders are sitting. Are they kind of moving their leg? Are they tense? When I feel like they're at a place where they're calm, now I can start maybe directing it and shifting the shoot into a space that is a little bit more directing and a little bit more hands-on. It's doing it step by step in a way that's not full on straight away. So you can create that ease in that person and where they feel safe, where their boundaries are not necessarily crossed straight away. And obviously that sounds crazy, but it's like sometimes people's boundaries are like being told what to do. If they don't really know you that well, they're not necessarily going to feel at ease just listening. But once they see, okay, the photographer is respecting my boundaries, they're respecting the fact that I'm new to this and that I don't know them that well, so let me just sit and figure out what's going on in the environment. Once that safety boundary is set, we can then move into directing, telling them what to do. And I've also moved into actually photographing transitions as opposed to specific poses, because I find that's really where a lot of those raw human moments tend to be hidden and tend to lie in between the poses when they don't feel like they're being photographed, even though they are. So that's something that I have definitely found in creating those raw human authentic portraits, is they may be like, okay, let me put my hand here, let's do this, let's do that. But it's in that moment when they lower their hands and they're like, they may just be looking while I'm fixing my settings. I'm like, cool, let's do it. Let's take that photo. I advise taking photos in transitions and seeing what comes up and seeing if those photos actually make you feel something. And it's not always about the other person. The other person may be really comfortable in front of the camera. So as a part of my shift in how I photograph, a lot of it has come with me being self-aware. And sometimes maybe it's my energy that's making the person feel uncomfortable, feeling, you know, she's over directing. I can sense that she's nervous. Because even if you're someone that's not necessarily aware of human psychology or the depths and can name all the things and things like that, sometimes as humans we just sense when someone's nervous. Having a moment for yourself to get grounded can also affect the energy of the entire shoot. It's a very subconscious act, but all those little nuances in energy can really affect the actual look and the feel of the end photo that you create. And to end this video with just some reflection on the most authentic and human portraits I've created is when I've actually allowed someone to settle into being seen. I'd be curious to know what feels forced to you about certain portraits that you've created or that you've observed in other photographers. Feel free to leave in the comments any ideas or any observations you've made along your journey. So I hope you enjoyed the video and that you found something of value. Till next time, bye!